We are changing lives. We're making a difference to thousands and millions of children's lives by being here and through what we do. We are sowing seeds for the future. We're sowing seeds that's going to change this world.
Children and youth deserve a better future. Better future, better situation than where we are now. Because violence is a violation of the life God desires for every child.
Lagi po natin tatandaan na tayo po mga kabataan ay pag-asa ng bayan. Nasa ating mga kamay yung future ng mga saling lahi ng ating bansa.
Ang nakita ko, World Vision was able to create projects that is able to sustain them, to teach them and educate them kung paano sila mabubuhay ng pangsarili nila.
Dahil binigyan kami ng sapat na kabuhayan ng World Vision, nung hindi ko kaya ibinigay noon sa mga pangangailangan ng mga anak ko, unti-unti na bibigay ko na ngayon.
Naniniwala kami na kapag ang mga batang Pinoy makapagtapos ng kanilang pag-aaral, mas uunlad yung bayan natin.
Sana wag silang mawala ng pag-asa kahit na ang daming problema, ang daming nagiging hadlang para makuha nila yung pangarap nila, para makuha nila yung edukasyon na gusto nila. Patuloy lang na lumaban.
Thanks to Propaganda, it's easy for us to study and makes learning more exciting.
With good result, the Division of Sarangani decided to institutionalize the culture of reading in the whole division.
Tumaas yung antas ng edukasyon ng mga bata. Dahil sa kanila, mananatili ang World Vision at mga sponsor sa isip namin, higit lalo sa aming puso. Saludo kami lahat.
Children and youth can provide solution as well to prepare, mitigate, and build back better when crisis happen.
Nagpapasalamat kami sa World Vision sa pagsusuporta sa aming munisipalidad. Ngayon, masasabi ko na handa ng dagami sa mga posibleng emergencies at kalamidad.
World Vision reiterates its commitment to help ensure that children of Marawi are provided for.
Kailangan maging handa sa mga gantong suliranin. Alamin ang mga dapat pagandaan at iwasan upang hindi umabot sa panganib ang ating kalagayan sa panahon ng kalamidad o sakuna. Dapat ready.
Yung naging focus ng Mother Baby Friendly Philippines Project, paano natin ma-regulate ang distribution ng mga breast milk substitutes and to raise awareness kung ano yung breastfeeding and kung bakit ito importante para sa mga anak at para sa mga nanay.
To all the sponsors and donors, thank you for your support in providing better quality of life for the children.
We're doing this in World Vision because we believe the Social Innovation Challenge, or finding those innovative minds, the game changers as we call them, would be instrumental in solving problems such as education and agriculture, as I mentioned.
Naging inspirasyon ko ay ang aking sponsor sa World Vision. Salamat sa Panginoon na may isang katulad niya na handang tumulong sa isang katulad kong bata. Kayo po ay isang tunay na bayani.
Sa ginagawa niyo po, tinutulungan niyo po mag-transform ang buhay ng mga bata at makita niyo ang kanilang halaga na tumulong din sa mga kapwa-bata.
I feel blessed, honored, and privileged to have been used as an instrument to share God's love dun sa aking sponsor. So, well, my heart is full.
Let's all pay it forward. Maliit na bagay po sa atin, pero napakalaki nun para sa kanila. Let's give them hope. Let's give them a brighter future.
I would encourage more people into the fold of World Vision for them to be able to enrich their lives as well as what I have did with mine.
Ako si Arnel, isang engineer, teacher, at advocate para sa mga bata. Lumaki ako sa Surigao sa isang mahirap na pamilya at komunidad. Akala ko noon, wala na akong pag-asa sa buhay. Nagsasaka ang tatay at nanay ko upang maitawid kaming magkakapatid. Bata pa ako, tumutulong na ako sa pagkopra. Hindi naging madali ang aming buhay. Isang araw, sa aming lugar, dumating ang World Vision. Naisama ako sa child sponsorship program nila.
When World Vision came in, that was the very first time na I experienced a different joy.
Natulungan nila ako sa pag-aaral. Marami akong natutunan sa trainings nila. Lumalalim ang kaalaman ko sa karapatan, lalo na para sa mga bata. Sa child sponsorship program ng World Vision, natagpuan ko ang pag-asa para umunlad. Dahil sa iba't ibang opportunities, nakapunta ako sa United Nations sa New York, nag-represent para sa mga batang Pilipino. Pinag-usapan namin ang disaster risk reduction. Nung natapos ako sa kolehiyo, nakapagturo sa isang state university at ako'y pumasa bilang isang electrical engineer. Sa dami ng blessing sa akin, naisip kong maging blessing din sa iba. Nagsimula ako ng sariling advokasya para sa mga bata. Tinutulungan ko sila magkaroon ng pag-asa. At hinihikayat ko ang mga magulang na maging responsable sa kanilang mga anak. Tumulong din ako sa mga lokal na electricians para makapag-review sila ng wasto at makapasa sila sa Master Electricians Board. Kaya ngayon, gusto ko ibahagi ang blessing ko. Nag-sponsor ako ng isang bata na taga North Cotabato. Sana mahanap din niya ang kanyang pangarap at pag-asa. Tulad ko.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are all well. From where you are, we are now on our second day of World Vision's Virtual Youth Summit. But before we proceed, let's have a short word of prayer. God, we thank you for this day. We thank you that you have gathered us from all Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao for this two-day summit. We thank you for our speakers for today and even yesterday. And we pray that we will learn a lot and be able to use this, Lord, in our lives and for our future. In Jesus' name, amen. Let us all rise for the Philippine National Anthem. again, this is the Virtual Youth Summit of World Vision. This is World Vision Development Foundation's initiative to reach out and continue to empower the youth in the Philippines to address certain topics on current social issues and advocacy. So, sino dito yung makasama natin kahapon? Please give us heart reacts from where you are on our Facebook page. And I can see so many comments all the way from Cagayan and Marawi. Wow. And we have even students from Cebu, Tarlac. That is amazing. Thank you all for tuning in. So again, we are 2,291 registrants, and we believe that some of them will be joining us later. But please do stand by and listen all throughout the event, because we will be giving out instructions for how you will get your e-certificate later. We would like to thank GCash and our official streaming partner, and also Enderun Colleges and our event partners for making this possible. So, nasa yung mga heart-like buttons natin dyan. Ayan. Okay, so we talked about mental health and leadership on our first day, and we know that the pandemic has really radically changed our lives, how we do things, how we go to school, how we even do the groceries, for example. And so this has not just affected our personal lives, but we can see this in the entire country and even around the world. So today we want to talk about a very significant part of how our future will pan out. So today we have a speaker with us to talk about the impacts of COVID-19 on the Philippine economy and why we should give attention to this and how this will affect our future. So our first speaker today is Mr. JC Punongbayan, and we are very glad to have him here. He is a PhD candidate and teaching fellow at UP School of Economics. He graduated summa cum laude and valedictorian from UPSE in 2009 and was awarded the Jose Encarnacion Junior Award for Excellence in Economics and the Gerardo P. Sicat Award for Best Undergraduate Thesis. He obtained his master's degree in UPSE in 2013 and has taught there as a lecturer and teaching fellow. His professional experience includes the Securities and Exchange Commission, the World Bank Office in Manila, the FEU Public Policy Center, and the National Economic and Development Authority. Mr. JC also writes a weekly economics column for Rappler.com. He is also the co-founder of UsapangEcon.com and co-host of the Usapang Econ podcast. So without further ado, we would like to introduce to you Mr. JC Punongbayan.
Hello, good afternoon, Laika, and to the rest of the World Vision Philippines team. So thank you very much for the invitation. So today I'm here to talk about the Philippine economy amid the pandemic. And one good thing about talking about this is that all of us can relate to the economy. Everyone of us has an understanding of how the economy works. Pero how exactly has the Philippine economy adjusted amid the pandemic? So we will be discussing that today. So let me start first with some statistics on COVID-19. Sorry. So this one shows you the latest data for ASEAN. So how does the Philippines compare with ASEAN neighbors in terms of the number of new cases of COVID-19? And as you can see, we have the most number of active cases as of yesterday, I think. And as well as the most number of total cases in ASEAN. And notice that in many ASEAN countries, they actually have 0 new cases or new deaths every day. Whereas in the Philippines, we have thousands of new cases every day. Now, everyone is talking about the so-called epidemic curve. And this shows you the number of new cases of COVID-19 over time. And how does the Philippine epidemic curve compare with the epidemic curves in other ASEAN countries, such as Thailand and Vietnam? You can see that basically there's no comparison. The epidemic curves for Thailand and Vietnam are essentially flat. They have 0 new cases in many days. And by comparison, the Philippines has so many cases every day, as I said earlier. And you can see, this is a snapshot of the respective situations of ASEAN countries, at least the ones that we can compare ourselves with. And this kind of encapsulates the pandemic responses in these countries. This is important as well. So this one shows you the reproductive number. It is a number of people that a person with COVID-19 might be able to infect. And we don't want this to be higher than 1 because that means that the pandemic continues to rage on. We want this to be below 1. And as you can see, in the past few days, the reproductive number of the Philippines has been increasing. And in fact, it is above 1. So there was a time actually that we are already below 1. So somehow the pandemic is abated in recent weeks, but that has been reversed in the past few days. And this one shows you the probability of an outbreak across different provinces of the Philippines. And you can download this you can view this at ncov.ph/map. And as you can see, for many provinces of the Philippines, the probability of an outbreak of COVID-19 is well in excess of 99%. So unlike many of our ASEAN neighbors where they can actually reopen their economies, we're still not there yet because the pandemic still rages on in the Philippines in a way that you can see in other countries in the region. Perhaps the closest would be Indonesia, but we really have a serious case of COVID-19 here in the Philippines. Now, the reason I went through all those statistics when it comes to COVID-19 is that we should treat this problem as a health crisis first before it is an economic crisis. We all know that the Philippine economy has tanked. If you read the news, if you listen to the news, you will hear the word recession. And a recession means that there is a sustained economic downturn in the Philippines. In other words, instead of growing, the Philippine economy has been contracting in recent months. And this is on account of the lockdowns, for example, where we don't want people to interact with each other so much. We want people to stay at their homes. So in other words, people are not spending as much as they used to, and the economy is suffering as a result. This graph shows you the GDP growth rate. So GDP, gross domestic product, it kind of summarizes how much the value of all goods and services produced in an economy. So it tells you how many things we can produce at a given point in time. And you can see that the Philippine economy as measured by GDP has contracted by 16.5% in the second quarter. So from April until June of this year, the economy experienced its worst contraction since the records began. So we have data from as far back as 1946 when it comes to GDP growth. And you can see that the economic crisis right now is even worse than the previous record holder during the martial law years in the 1980s. You can see that we experienced 9 consecutive quarters of negative growth, but nowhere in the vicinity of 16.5%. You can also see that in the previous recession back in the early 1990s, that pales in comparison with the 16.5 contraction we saw in the second quarter. And even in recent crises such as the Asian financial crisis in the late 1990s, as well as the more recent global financial crisis in the late 2000s, the Philippine economy actually continued to grow. We did not contract. And that attests to the robustness, the strength of the Philippine economy in past decades, but that has been reversed almost overnight by the pandemic. When you compare the contraction of the Philippine economy vis-a-vis other ASEAN countries, you will see that we experienced one of the biggest contractions in the region. So you will see that Malaysia contracted by 17%, followed by our 16.5%, and then you have Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia. But notice that Vietnam actually grew by 0.4% in the second quarter. So you might be wondering why they grew amid the pandemic. It is because they were able to reopen their economy pretty quickly because they addressed the pandemic as early as January, February, and March. And now they are reaping the rewards of their efforts back then. They imposed, for example, localized lockdowns. They had efficient contact tracing and all these measures very early on. And as a result, they were able to contain the spread of the pandemic in their country So the economy opened up pretty quickly compared to us, where we can't do that just yet. Now, if you drill down on the GDP figures, you will see that those green bars there, those represent consumption spending. So the GDP of the Philippines can be read as total spending in the economy. So the more people spend, the larger our economy becomes. And you will notice that in the previous, for the longest time, the Philippine economy has been driven primarily by consumption spending. In other words, you're eating at restaurants, going to the movies, going shopping. All of these fuel the economy. So out of 100 pesos, about 66 or 67 pesos out of that will be accounted for by your consumption spending. But notice that there was a negative growth of consumption spending in the past quarter. In fact, it pulled down total economic growth because of the lockdowns and the recession that we are currently in. So people are not spending, so you will see that GDP has contracted a lot. But notice as well the blue bars there. So the blue bars represent investment spending. So unlike consumption spending, investment spending is important because it fuels future growth. So this involves the production of machines, other durable equipment, new construction projects, new housing projects. All these fuel future growth. But because there's an even larger decline of that in the second quarter, that kind of tells you that the economic rut that we are in will, in all probability, will last for some time. Notice as well that only government spending propped up the economy in the second quarter, the orange bar there. And this underscores the pivotal role of the government when it comes to addressing the economic problems of our country right now. Now, what about the different sectors? So you can also break down GDP based on what sectors are contributing to GDP. So you have agriculture, industry, and services. And notice that for the longest time, services have been driving the Philippine economy. But because many of the face-to-face interactions that we are trying to avoid can be found in services, we are discouraging people in those sectors from doing business as usual. So you can see the big contraction of service sector growth in the second quarter, followed by industry. So you have manufacturing, construction, utilities, etc. But notice there was a surprise growth of agriculture in the second quarter, but very, very small. The rest of the economy has tanked. But I will also note that in some industries, actually, there's still growth. For example, in ICT, in financial services, and in, for example, e-commerce, when you go shopping via Shopee or Lazada, all these contribute to spending and growth. But for the rest of the economy, it's a bad situation. Now, the decline in economic activity as seen in GDP data is parallel with the declines in mobility that we have seen using Google mobility data. So you will see that especially in mid-March, where when we experienced a lockdown, the most severe lockdown, enhanced community quarantine, there was a significant decline of mobility. So people are avoiding groceries, parks, pharmacies, workplaces, retail and recreation areas, as well as transit stations. But on the opposite side of the coin, you can see that there's an increase in the mobility in residential areas. In other words, people are hunkering down. Excuse me. People are hunkering down at their houses amid the pandemic. They are afraid to go out in fear of contracting the virus. But notice that when the lockdown was loosened in June, so general community quarantine, the mobility levels are still far from returning to their pre-pandemic levels. So in other words, people are still not confident to go out of their houses and resume business as usual. If you break down the mobility data across the different regions, you can also do that using the Google mobility data. You will notice a significant decline, especially in Metro Manila and Central Visayas, where Cebu City is. So this kind of belies the claim that people there have been pasaway or hard-headed, when in fact mobility in those regions went down the most. Now, this is interesting. So if you get the mobility data for other ASEAN countries as well, you will notice that we experience some of the biggest declines in mobility compared to other ASEAN countries. I highlighted here Vietnam, There was also a significant decline, especially in April. They imposed a nationwide lockdown that lasted for only 3 weeks. And after that, they were able to reopen their economy pretty quickly. And you can see the rise in mobility again after their lockdown. So they're well on their way of returning to their pre-pandemic levels of mobility. Whereas the Philippines, we're still down below there. I'm not sure what this looks like if you update the data, but as of mid-July, this is what the data looks like. Now, the declines in mobility and economic activity have resulted in much economic suffering. And in fact, 26% of firms have closed operations, whether temporarily or permanently, according to the Department of Trade and Industry. So that's about 1 out of 4 businesses. So if you look at the news, you will hear many of our favorite restaurants, for example, closing down one by one. This is it. So this is one of the manifestations of the economic suffering of people. Just yesterday, the Asian Development Bank actually came out with a study showing that the experiences of firms in the Philippines were actually some of the worst in Asia. So, for example, as much as 70.6% of firms here in the Philippines temporarily closed. That's one of the highest in ASEAN. As well as, for example, the cancellation of contracts, as well as the delays in the delivery of products and services, we had some of the worst figures in Asia. Now, the decline in economic activity is so great that the average Filipino's income or GDP per capita, so if you cut up GDP to all, 110 million Filipinos, you will get around 36,000 pesos. So each of us has 36,000 pesos in if you think of share to GDP, that's how large it is. But notice that GDP per capita actually went down to its lowest level since 2015. So one way to interpret this is as if the economic gains of the past 5 years have been erased by the pandemic. Although no doubt many people will not experience this. For example, rich kids, for example, rich families, they will not see this much decline in income. But for many Filipino households and individuals, this will be the case. Now, unemployment is also at a record high, especially in April. It shot up to 17.7%. That's the highest on record since the earliest comparable data since 2005. The unemployment rate actually went down to 10% in July. So there's a slight improvement there, although we're still talking about in excess of 4 million unemployed Filipinos, more than twice the usual number. So there's still a lot of economic suffering there, and many people affected by the pandemic will actually not be reflected in the unemployment figures because, for example, if you have your own business, you're self-employed, or if you're helping out with a family business, even if you are not paid, or in other words, if you are an unpaid family worker, you are still considered as employed. So you will not be counted among the ranks of the unemployed. So this kind of hides some of the economic suffering because of the pandemic. The underemployment statistics are also quite bad. So in April, it's in excess of 18%. That went down to 17.3% in July. But these people are those with work but still wanting to work more. So they're not satisfied with their current pay. So they need to work more hours. They want to work more hours, but they cannot do that. So it's another reflection of the economic suffering during the pandemic. The SWS Social Weather Station also released data on joblessness. So this is not exactly comparable with the official statistics of the government, but as much as 45.5% or almost half of adult workers in the labor force asked by SWS said that they were jobless at one point or another. More than the absolute levels of joblessness and unemployment, it's more important to look at the movements. So you will notice a steep increase in the joblessness rate as well as the unemployment and underemployment rate of government. So all these point to the same fact that the economy is really in a bad situation. The labor force participation rate also dipped in April. Actually, before the pandemic, the labor force participation rate has been going down because of certain policies such as K to 12 or free college tuition in public colleges and universities that incentivize people or force them to actually study more rather than work. But because of the pandemic, many people have been discouraged entirely to work. So they drop out of the labor force because there are no job opportunities to be had. But the labor force participation rate actually recovered to 62% back in July. Now, the nature of work also was changed dramatically by the pandemic. So the number of hours worked by both part-time and full-time workers went down. And the proportion of people who have work but are not reporting for work, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, went up significantly. What about the job losses? So what sectors experienced the most job losses? Well, services. Again, where you can find many of the face-to-face interactions that we are trying to avoid, and then followed by industry and then agriculture. But as far as the government statistics are concerned, most sectors experienced job losses, whether large or small, especially in April. But because of the improvement in the unemployment rate in July, most of these trends will have reversed already. What about OFW? So the OFWs are not reflected in the government's unemployment statistics, but you have to look at the other data sources. So for example, we know that as of mid-May, almost 140,000 OFWs have been repatriated already, and 600,000 are seeking assistance from government. So the OFWs are so important to the economy. For the longest time, their remittances have been propping up our economy. But now, they are forced to go back to the Philippines without good employment prospects. So they need help as well. As for other welfare indicators, so you have hunger as well. The SWS collects data on hunger, well, self-reported hunger. So as many as as much as 21% of Filipino households reported experiencing some kind of hunger, whether moderate or severe. So that's 1 out of 5 Filipino households. And what about poverty? So the Philippine Institute for Development Studies estimates that as many as 1.5 million Filipinos can be pushed into poverty, but the figure can be as large as 5.5 million actually if people do not receive enough economic aid from government. So there's so much economic suffering right now and people need help. So we need to address that problem. And so many people also feel that their lives have worsened in the past year. And if you look at the data, that's the highest since the earliest records of the SWS. So something that you will hear from the news often is that the economy is often invoked to justify the lockdowns. So we have to lock down the economy. We have to loosen quarantine restrictions because of the economy. We want to save the economy from further deteriorating. But actually, what government is missing here is that they should treat this as a health crisis first before it is an economic crisis. So until the health crisis is abated, you can expect no economic recovery. So consumer confidence is key to reviving our economy. So people need to be confident that when they go out of their houses, they won't get sick because of the pandemic. So until they are confident, even if you loosen quarantine restrictions further, they will not spend as much as they used to. And in fact, one good example of this would be Vietnam. As I mentioned, their economy grew in the second quarter, and that's because they addressed this health crisis very promptly back in January and February. And there's also recent research in the US showing that even if so many states opened their economies already, people still didn't go out of their houses and spend as much as they used to. So consumer confidence is really what we need right now, especially knowing the fact that the Philippine economy for the longest time has been consumption driven. Now, what about the Philippine government's response? So, as I said, the role of government is more important now more than ever. Okay, and unfortunately, there are certain problems when it comes to the government's pandemic response. First would be bad policy making, in the sense that rather than promote consumer confidence, their policies have been doing the reverse. So, for example, they were slow to act back in February and March, whereas other countries have been planning and already imposing lockdowns, whether localized or not. We were late to join that game of other countries. So there's also too much reliance on militaristic lockdowns. So, for example, you have the alphabet soup of ECQ, GCQ, MGCQ, etc. And there's also bad communications and messaging. But I think one of the worst things would be lack of evidence-based policy making. So this is a time when we need to listen to the health experts more than ever. They must lead the government's pandemic response, but that's not something that we have seen. And for many of the policies they have imposed, for example, the loosening of physical distancing in public utility vehicles, motorcycle barriers, tuob, and then balik probinsya, these have not been backed up by proper study or evaluation. And as a result of that, it seems that government has been wishy-washy when it comes to many of the policies they have imposed, only to walk back on those policies that they have imposed. The second problem would be government is crimping on economic aid. So I showed you so many statistics pointing to the same fact that there's so much economic suffering right now. Economic misery is at an all-time high, and yet government is not spending enough economic aid. And for example, you have the social amelioration program back in April and May. They're still not done distributing the aid for May. And that's only good for 2 months. So there's no follow-up to the social amelioration program, even if millions of Filipinos face the prospect of becoming poor because of the pandemic. And then you have the Bayanihan to Recover as One Act, otherwise known as the Bayanihan 2 law, which has been recently signed by President Duterte. That involves 165.5 billion pesos in economic aid. But if you compare that with the GDP losses back in the second quarter of 707 billion, 165 billion is actually small, okay? And some lawmakers actually were proposing much larger economic rescue packages. For example, the Arise Philippines bill, if you've heard that in the news, that's about 1.3 trillion pesos. But government only allotted 165.5 billion until the end of this year. And on top of this, there's not much aid for firms as well. And this is important because we don't want businesses to die, because it will be harder to jumpstart the economy later if they are allowed to die right now. So we need to be focusing as well on the economic aid that's needed by businesses, whether in the form of wage subsidies, zero interest loans, or other forms of assistance. Another thing is that the economic managers have been inordinately fiscally conservative. In other words, nagtitipid sila for some reason. One of the reasons would be they're afraid of blowing up the deficit and debt. So we hear in the news, for example, that the Philippine debt level is at an all-time high, trillions of pesos. But in fact, there's no problem when it comes to debt. Insofar as there's a crisis, you have to contextualize the debt. So many people need economic aid, and if government doesn't have much money, they can always borrow, and borrowing is justified if it will go to the people who need economic aid. So per se, there's no problem when it comes to borrowing more, as long as people are allowed to survive this pandemic. And if you look at the government statistics, they have in fact money. It's not true that they don't have money. And then lastly, government is focused on the wrong priorities. So right now, Congress is deliberating the 2021 budget, which will be crucial for the country's economic recovery. But so far, we've seen that government is proposing budget cuts, severe budget cuts for health sector of all things, and economic aid as well. And instead, they are pushing for infrastructure through build, build, build. They argue that this is one of the best ways to prop the economy, is so far as there will be multiplier effects. So, for example, if you spend 1 peso on infrastructure, it will supposedly generate more than 1 peso in total economic activity. But until now, we haven't seen the data that back up those claims. And they are also proposing corporate tax cuts through the CREATE bill, as well as the setting up of a super corporation that will help embattle the businesses and companies through the GUIDE bill. But these are, I would argue, these are not the things that we need right now. We need to be focusing again on the health sector. So, for example, testing, contact tracing, quarantine measures, etc. We need to be focusing on that and listening to the health experts first. Because until the virus goes away, until the vaccine is discovered, there will be no escaping the risk when it comes to contracting the virus and seeing multiple outbreaks in the future. So we need to address that first and manage the risks there before we focus on all these other things. We need to be pouring more money on the health sector compared to the other sectors of the economy. Okay, so I think that's that. So I think the main takeaway from my talk would be we should all be treating this as a health crisis first before it is an economic crisis. And that should be the bedrock of all the discussions and the policies that government will be creating. So if you want to learn more about this, you can read my articles on Rappler as well as on Usapang Econ. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Mr. JC. Please do stay. We do have some questions from a lot of our youth today. Wow, info overload ba tayo dyan? Maraming nagko-comment din. And really, it's sad to see that there are a lot of things that are changing sa economy natin. And even especially for the most vulnerable, which is World Vision's aim to help, no? And so ito, Mr. JC, I think before we answer any of the other questions, how should this be any concern of the youth today? Why, if there are any of us who are watching or hindi naman ganun ka-affected or mga iba na sobrang na-affected, why should this concern us?
Mm-mm. So the thing is, the economy affects all of us. So for example, well, as I said earlier, so many Filipinos will be experiencing or are experiencing economic suffering, but not everyone. And for many young people, they might not even feel the effects of the pandemic. They will still be able to live comfortably. But that doesn't mean that other people are experiencing the same thing. And we have to expand our realm of experience. I mean, we have to be empathetic to the suffering of other people as well. For example, those families that well, for example, so many students have stopped going to school, and many are having a hard time, for example, coping with the online and remote learning measures of government. So for example, that's one thing that affects the youth today, and we have to monitor, for example, what the government plans to do when it comes to that. When it comes to the policies of the Department of Education and the CHED as well and TESDA, all of these will affect the youth. And then you have so many young people also graduating recently, but facing little to no economic prospects when it comes to jobs, because as I said, unemployment is at an all-time, it is at a record high. So many people are having a hard time looking for work, and youth unemployment actually is a lot higher than the average unemployment rate. So the youth will be experiencing unemployment much more than other sectors. So that's another way by which they are affected. So we should all be trying to understand all these economic statistics, because these are not just numbers but are reflections of the experiences of so many people.
Wow, yes, that's true. And also we even have in the comments that their mga kabataan natin, their parents are also affected. So as a result, they are also affected when it comes to their education, their daily needs. So these things will eventually affect each of us. So we also want all of us to have that sense of compassion for those who are in need or the most vulnerable during this time. So thank you for that, Mr. JC. I just have a couple more questions from our youth. So the question here is, how can we identify, or can you please identify the industries that are positively affected by the pandemic and negatively affected by the pandemic?
Yes, I think it's much easier to identify those that were actually not affected or actually growing, because that's a very short list. As I mentioned, financial services, for example, banks, etc. And then you have ICT and then e-commerce. So all of you who are buying stuff from Shopee or Lazada, so there's a significant growth there. What else? So, and then you have plants. You have all the plantitos and plantitas, and then but there, so just a few sectors of the economy are growing. And then you have public services as well. So that's essentially government services, which is obvious because they're at the front line of the economic and the health response of the country. But there, we are waiting for the next round of economic statistics when it comes to GDP. That won't come until many more weeks. But the data for the second quarter are quite indicative. And it's important to note that many other countries as well are experiencing the same thing. But notice that we are experiencing one of the longest lockdowns in the region, as well as the deepest economic contractions. So when it comes to the health aspect of this crisis and the economic aspect, we seem to be having the worst of both worlds. So that only underscores the crucial link between health and the economy. You have to really address the health crisis first before the economy, because everything hinges on the health response. Until people are not confident to go out, because they fear the virus, the economy won't recover quickly. So there.
Thank you for that, Mr. JC. And also, you mentioned there are a lot of restaurants, our favorite restaurants, that are closing. So we would think that they can probably set up an online or grab food, but there are a lot that may have that access but are still closing down. So we can see how affected they really are, not even being able to cope through online means or through delivery and stuff. So thank you for that, Mr. JC. Also, there's another question here. Among the proposed solutions to rebuild the economy is the passage of the CREATE bill. So do you think this would be beneficial to the country from a macroeconomic standpoint?
So when it comes to economic crisis, there are two basic tools that government can use. Number one would be fiscal policies. So for example, tax cuts or higher government spending, as well as monetary policy, basically interest rate of the central bank, well, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. So CREATE is a tax cut on the corporate income taxes paid by, well, corporations. And for some time now, this has been pushed by the economic managers, and they are arguing that it could be one way to prop up the economy right now. But there are studies actually recently that show that it might not be the case. So even if you pass the CREATE bill, it will not actually help the economy that much. Insofar as, well, number one, again, you go back to the point that we are a consumption-driven economy. So even if you lower the taxes of corporations, until people are not going to their shops and restaurants, their income stream will be quite limited. So so that's the crucial thing, the liquidity of businesses. So unless that is addressed directly, then even if you lower taxes for them, it will not help the economy all that much. So this is part and parcel of the government's tax reform program. But many economists have already spoken out that this may not be the best time for the CREATE bill.
I see. and from a youth standpoint or a student standpoint, is there an effect, both positive or negative, in the economy if the government will pursue an academic freeze?
Oh, well, well, I'm not really an expert on that. You have to ask an educator. But well, as a teaching fellow myself at UP, I see firsthand the hardships of students when it comes to online learning. And you have to note that even teachers are experiencing lots of problems as well, both in terms of connectivity as well as the preparations for classes. So everyone is really having a hard time. Everyone is adjusting, and if the academic freeze is not feasible at this point, at least schools must be more compassionate when it comes to their students and their teachers as well. So there needs to be a relaxation of the things that we were used to, for example, when it comes to the conduct of exams, homework, etc. All of these will have to change to account for the connectivity problems that many students will be facing. And at the end of the day, we want to avoid the situation where millions of students will be left behind because of the pandemic and the pursuance of the academic year amid the pandemic. So we want to avoid that. So we need to all adjust.
Right, that's right. Thank you, Mr. JC. But also, from a student of HRM, Catherine also asked her question here. She said, "What is the future of tourism and hospitality industry now that we are experiencing a pandemic?"
That's a good question. So I think one of the worst affected sectors would be the tourism sector, where there's really basically all face-to-face interaction and travel as well. We are restricting travel still. Still not safe to do business as usual in tourism. And the tourism sector in the Philippines actually was asking for about 10 billion pesos in economic aid. Until it's safe to open the resorts, the hotels, etc., they need to be given enough economic aid. Otherwise, so millions of people will be suffering, especially insofar as a significant chunk of the Philippine economy is coming from tourism. About, well, less than 20%, more than 10%, around that vicinity. So it's really important for our economy and millions of people's lives. But until it's safe to resume business as usual, we should be giving economic aid. But unfortunately, in Bayanihan 2, the aid that was requested by the tourism sector was actually cut. And that's the theme that we see as well in the 2021 budget. They are slashing economic aid budgets left and right. So I think one of the things that the youth can do is to monitor these developments and speak out on social media, among themselves, to generate talk about these policies. We should be looking at the government's response more than ever.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. JC. I think as we wrap up, just one last question, I think, from every one of us is from Sam also. What can we do now as individuals, how, or even us from our point of view, or from NGOs, what can we do now to help those who are most in need?
So there's a lot that can be done, but I think as I said, one of the most important things would be to monitor government, because I keep mentioning that their role is so pivotal right now because so many markets have been devastated by the pandemic, and there's a lot riding on the efficiency as well as the effectivity and the scale and scope of government's response. And we all have a responsibility to monitor the government's policy responses, call it out when it's not so good, because at the end of the day, we want evidence-based policies as well. So that will not happen if we don't talk about these things. So I think that's one of the best things that we can do right now, to monitor and scrutinize government's policies, because at the end of the day, everyone will benefit from that.
Thank you, Mr. JC, and thank you for that wonderful lecture. And of course, World Vision would also like to extend that these are really from Mr. JC's point of view in the economy, and also his lecture was derived from these facts that he was able to get. So from our standpoint here in World Vision, we want to be able to help those who are in need. So we really want to thank you, Mr. JC, for enlightening us that, and in our response, that we can also take part in helping those who are economically affected, right? So World Vision has platforms as well that you can join in fundraising as well. So we can talagang tulong-tulong tayo to really rise back again. So if I see a lot of students who are also helping small-time businesses, sa mga friends nila, sa mga kapitbahay, and I think this is really a thing that we should also treasure, no? yung bayanihan natin. And so here at World Vision, we also want to tell the youth that you can definitely help. We also have a partnership with the Department of Education for Abutin Natin campaign to help sustain also the students with their education, with their modules and their gadgets for their schooling. So thank you so much for enlightening us about what's happening in our country, Mr. JC. Thank you for all these facts that we also need to consider as we do our work, as we live our lives in our daily routine. So maraming salamat po, Mr. JC. Again, we thank you.
Salamat.
Maraming salamat po. So, thank you everyone for this amazing lecture and amazing discussion. We will now be having a 5-minute break. I know a lot of you have a lot of things to process right now, and that's good. It means that kung meron tayong need that there needs to be addressed, and we want to help out as much as we can. So for those who can be a blessing, please do become a blessing. There's so many platforms out there that we can share. And so before our 5-minute break, we want to thank GCash again for being our official streaming partner, as well as Enderun Colleges for sponsoring our raffle prizes. We would also like to thank our event partners shown on our screen. You can see here National Youth Volunteers Coalition, 2030 Youth Force Philippines, Youth for Mental Health Coalition, De La Salle College of St. Benilde, Singapore School Cebu, Reedley International School, Sangguniang Commission for Mental Health, HiUnite, Maroon FM, Ateneo Meco, PUP Central Student Council. So we thank you all for joining us, and we will just have a 5-minute break. So please come back here after 5 minutes. Thank you.
I'm proud to be part of the Enderun community because for once in my life, I feel that I'm surrounded by people who share the same passion as I do, who strive for excellence the way I do as well. Enderun is full of students from different countries around the world. Being around these students, it helps bring new ideas to the table. So it makes me become more aware of what their culture is all about, and it prepares me for when I go out into the real world.
It excites me personally knowing that Enderun is continuously growing and continuously trying to improve itself through collaborating with international companies and universities as well in order to prepare us for our career paths.
The environment here in Enderun is very pleasing, very friendly, and very international. I mean, when I entered the school, I knew that I would have an environment where I could easily adapt to.
And as an international school, the standard of things and things, the maintenance, how things are maintained and how things are run, and even just the campus in general and the facility and the extracurricular activities that are provided for students here. For me, it was something new, exciting, and something that I know I would actually really jump at.
Majority of our faculty members are not really from the academy. Most of our faculty members have in the past been practitioners and have vast years of experience to be able to guide the young generation into the preferred field of profession. And this is one of the plus factors that our students enjoy.
Opportunities like this don't come often, so it's really something that we should take advantage of since it was made available locally. Aside from this, we really have the best facilities and the best teachers, the best chefs, and you're surrounded by people who share the same passion as you.
I think Enderun sets itself apart
from all the other schools, you see, because when I come to school, I learn more than just theories. I learn more than just things that you get from books, you know. In Enduron, they want to equip you with experience. That's why they call it the Enduron experience, because even before you leave the walls of the school, even before you graduate, they build you with internship and experience, and I think ultimately like that's what I look forward to, because I know I could only like better myself each day that I come here.
The Office of Career Services assists students in determining the best career path for them. So from freshman year all the way until graduation, we guide them and we assist them in honing the skills needed in order for them to achieve their lifelong goals. We are very proud to say that we have 100% placement every semester in over 30 countries. We send students to top restaurants, large hotel chains, and Fortune 500 companies all over the world. When they come back to us, they have a better understanding of who they are as an individual, as well as what it will take for them to achieve a fruitful career.
It seems like yesterday I was a student in Enduron, and now I am the general manager of an upcoming hotel in Boracay. Every time I'm asked about Enduron, I always say that we're the only school who put up a hotel management company, Enduron Hospitality Management. I may seem young, but I'm confident that Enduron education coupled with real-life experiences made a difference.
On my personal path, I have gone into mentoring aside from teaching. Meaning to say, any student who has finished can come back and consult, and I will help them realize their dream, because I realize the success of a school is equated to the success of a student. So therefore, this kind of obsession we must place to making our student successful.
Welcome back to World Vision's Virtual Youth Summit 2020. I hope naka-rest kayo, naka-bathroom break kayo, and truly know we're experiencing a lot of changes. So not just with our mental health, how we can step up in leadership, and also with the economy, and how we can step up and sharing our blessings as well. So we know now that how the pandemic is affecting us, but not to a point of silence. The youth has a voice, and we have with us our very own Youth and Education Ambassador to talk about social awareness and youth empowerment. So I want to talk more about her. She's not just our ambassador, but she's also the ambassador for YouTube Creators for Change Philippines. She is in Google Cyber Peace Champion, vlogger and content creator, singer and songwriter, motivational speaker, and host. Janina Vela is a 21-year-old content creator who went from posting beauty tutorials to social and political commentary. She believes in using her platform to empower the youth to initiate change in their own little part of the world, so we could call and wake up everyone to a better one. She encourages the youth to find their voice and speak out on current issues, but learn to do it in a kind and respectful way. So her tagline goes, be a little kinder. So please welcome our very own Youth and Education Celebrity Ambassador, Janina Vela.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Janina Vela. Thank you, Ate Laika, for introducing me. And of course, thank you, World Vision, for having me. I'm so excited. This is my first webinar with World Vision, and obviously I'm very, very honored to be a Youth and Education Ambassador, because if you follow me on my channel, if you're subscribed, then you know how much education is really important to me, and in equipping the next generation to be the future leaders of our nation, because the next generation is truly the forefront of our future. So I just want to say hello. I have my phone here, but I can say hi to everybody who is here. So Colleen, hi. Charlotte, Carl, Abigail, hi guys. Thank you for joining us. Mamaya may Q&A tayo. Para kung may questions kayo, you can send them in. We can have a lot of time for that. I think, yeah, not a lot, but we have time for that. Anyways, I was tasked to speak on social awareness and youth empowerment. And I know na ngayon, yun yung branding ko as, my introduction went, I'm an ambassador for World Vision, for Teach Peace, Build Peace with Google. I work with Operation Blessing, and that's kind of my branding as an influencer, but also as, Janina Vela or Janina Punzalan, which is my real name. Not that Janina Vela is my fake name, but, you guys get that. Okay, so now I like to kind of call myself a political commentator, but that wasn't always the case. I wasn't always branded as, in one of my future brand deals, they listed me as a philanthropist. What philanthropist? Stop yun, philanthropist. But again, that wasn't always that way. When I started in 2015, I was 15 years old. That was 6 years ago, and I had 2 goals, and you guys are gonna laugh at my goals, but my 2 goals were literally to reach 5,000 subscribers and to partner with SM Department Store. No, this is not sponsored. That was really just Janina Vela in her dreams. At 15 years old, syempre neneng-nene pa, no? And so those 2 goals, honestly, I achieved within my first 2 years of YouTube. And so what was next for me, for this nene girl? 50,000 subscribers? Okay, check na. 100,000? Okay, check na. 200, 300, 500? Check, check, check. Publish an EP? Check. Win awards? Check. I'm not here to brag, but I would like to brag a little. No, I'm not here to brag. Sa totoo lang, nandito lang ako, or I'm here to humble myself even, saying lahat ng mga achievements na to, all of the things that I have mentioned, it does not matter without a purpose. Without a purpose, without a goal that goes beyond yourself. And I learned this difficult lesson in 2018 when my mental and emotional health took an all-time low. No, I was at the peak. I was at the peak of my career, yet I felt like emotionally I was at my lowest. I felt like I was always chasing things like shoots or content for a vlog or even flights. And for what? Not that none of those matter. I'm very, very thankful. I'm very proud of my achievements. But if that's all that there is for life, if that's all that life is, then what is life? Philosophical. What is life then? I love talking about legacy. That word, such a beautiful word. And when I think about this word legacy, I automatically think of my Lola, who I was never really able to meet, but I love bringing her up in conversations and in talks, because for me, that's the definition of living of living a legacy, of living a life worth leaving behind. Because until now, when I meet people who used to watch her shows or listen to her radio shows, they always tell me how much her words have changed their lives, how she had added value to them, how she was always inspiring, encouraging, and empowering. And if you go back to the word legacy, kung napanood niyo yung Hamilton, did you guys watch Hamilton? I love Hamilton. He mentioned that your legacy is planting seeds in a garden that you never get to see. And so if legacy is planting seeds in the garden, I had to ask myself, and I want to ask you today, what are the seeds that you have planted so far? Ooh, because I know from my Lola that she really planted seeds of inspiration and empowerment. But I kind of made it a point that I didn't just want to leave behind makeup tips. Makeup tips are great. I love watching makeup tutorials. But I knew that it wasn't always going to be about the winged liner. But eventually, it turned into becoming or being about kindness. Okay, so during my hiatus, so I took a hiatus in 2018, and I took that time to read a lot of books, whether it be Christian books or political books, philosophy and psychology, and through all of those books and all of that time that I got to spend with my friends, my family, and my church, I learned how to love and take care of myself. I learned how to take breathers and listen to my soul and spend time with God. And here's what I learned also. So I took this time to love myself and take care of myself. But here's something I learned: self love shouldn't enable you to just be selfish, but rather inspire you to be selfless. AKA, it's not about you, hunty. It really isn't. And I know that's kind of painful. It's like, oh, I'm not the center of the universe. Sis, no. So I learned to love not only myself, but my family better, my friends better, my church better. And eventually, my heart was opened and I learned how to love my nation better. I thought, honestly, I was just into anthropology and all those things. But apparently, I found this newfound love for the nation. And trust me, I'm still that girl who loves a good winged eyeliner. But let's go winged eyeliner with a purpose. So I actually want to go back to my roots for this talk, and let's do a little kind of get ready with me vlog. If you guys have followed me for a long time, then you kind of know this format. But it's going to be get ready with me. And so it starts with, let's start this get ready with me with your eyes. Let's think. When you put makeup on your eyes, you have mascara so that your eyes look bigger. You have eyeliner and eyeshadow so your eyes look brighter. And if we apply that, get it? Apply that. If we apply that to real life, beautiful eyes would mean opened eyes, eyes that see. And if ignorance, and we see, sucks to say, we see a lot of that right now: passivity, apoliticalness, and ignorance. If ignorance is a distorted view of reality, then the best cure for that is to see. And so this was kind of my seeing moment in 2019, just last year. Was that last year? Yes, just last year, nung nangyari yung water shortage. May nakakaalala ba yung sa water shortage? And that reached my house. Wala kaming tubig for a couple of days. Or, a week, no? A week. Wow, only 2 weeks. 2 months straight. Basta, matagal kaming walang tubig. And I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to that. And so that happened to me. And though my family and I could afford to buy water, yung galon-galon na tubig, automatically my mind kind of flooded to the people who couldn't afford that, who didn't have that luxury. And my little privileged bubble was popped in that moment because I realized how much they deserved, but how much they did not have. And then, all honesty, if I'm gonna be candid, no, a few weeks ago, my privileged bubble was popped again. Akala ko hindi na ako ignorante, no? Pero I was speaking in San Pablo, and then I talked about this water shortage, and I asked them if they had felt the water shortage and stuff. And then I saw on Twitter a couple of minutes after that, somebody said, haha, who's gonna tell Janina na laging walang tubig dito sa San Pablo? And I was like, oh my gosh. That was a big, kind of blow for me. And as my privileged bubble was popped, empathy grew. I felt empathy for my countrymen for one of the very first times in my life. And empathy is trying to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. It's listening. It's not just listening to debate, no, but listening to understand what people are going through, understand what they feel every single day. And I still try to do that. I see sina Mea nandito. Sino ba yung Diva with Janina squad? So I see these girls and these faces who tell me their stories that help me understand the world beyond my house, beyond my bedroom, beyond my myself. And so that's the true definition of open eyes, of beautiful eyes. Not mascara, not eyeshadow, but eyes that see people with empathy, eyes that see people with compassion and with love. And so number two is Okay, wait. My brother is going down the stairs. He's singing out loud. Ryan, I'm on a live. And so number 2 is we want an open. No, sorry, not yet pala. Part of open eyes. Sorry, medyo na-throw off ako. Here we go. When we think about, empathy and listening to other people and it doesn't kind of just stop at feeling and connecting with other people, but we kind of have to take a little bit of action towards it. And so pagkatapos ng water shortage, or during the water shortage actually, I started researching on it. Yung mga legal proceedings nito, kung bakit, ano yung nangyayari sa dams and stuff like that. And for every political video that I make, it takes about a week of research. And a lot of people say like, whoa, grabe, Janina, hindi ko kayang gawin yung ginagawa mo. And I realized, I was like, no, honestly, I feel like it's a Gen Z trait. Hear me out. I feel like it's a Gen Z trait because don't tell me na you've never stalked the girlfriend of your ex-boyfriend, the girlfriend of your ex-boyfriend, and you stalked her to see if you're prettier than her, if you have any mutual friends, or you want to know where they met, or you stalk mo yung bagong blockmate mo sa school para makita kung single siya or saan siya nakatira, yung mga ganon. And so the lengths we go to find out information that benefits us and benefits ourselves is kind of crazy. So then I thought, what if we went through those same lengths to benefit others as well? And so any time that I'm going to flesh out my opinions online, I always try to back it up with facts, not only to protect my credibility, but I learned that emotions will get you heard, but facts will keep people listening. A bunch of capital letters and exclamation points. Yeah, people will read your tweet for a while, but then end up scrolling. But if you hit them with the true, credible facts, then maybe people will listen a little bit more. Another quote that I love is, don't raise your voice, but improve your argument. There are so many people I see who love na parang pinapatulan nila yung mga trolls, ganon. Yung parang keyboard warriors rin, kahit hindi sila troller on the one side. But I learned, don't raise your voice, improve your argument. You don't have to speak louder. Just speak in the truth. Just speak, speak in the truth. And obviously, speak with compassion and empathy. And because I'd like to think this, I think, if I was ever huddled up with all of the noisy people on Twitter, anybody who tweets multiple times about political issues, if I was huddled up with trolls and other people of different sides, would they be able to recognize me? Would you be able to recognize my tweets out of the whole other Twitter sphere? And that's why my new tagline, let's all be a little kinder, is so important to me. Because I feel like it's important in every single part of my life, whether that be with my family, texting my friend, or tweeting online, or making a video, or dealing with a waitress who's masungit to me. Let's all be a little kinder. Sorry, number 2 is open mind. So we'll talk about the hair situation, the head situation, an open mind. And I think now that we have open eyes that can see, now it's time to kind of open our minds. Open our minds to the truth, and as I was mentioning, parang the world right now is at our fingertips, no? If you're watching me right now on this webinar on Facebook, you kind of don't really have an excuse to be ignorant. Because akala ko, for example, this is what I thought kasi yung mga legal documents, I thought legal documents were like stowed away in a very old library where like it was kind of creepy and dusty everywhere. But I realized legal documents are all online na pala. And you're on YouTube now. The place you go for entertainment is also the same place you can go to for information. And so that goes in with kind of having an open mind. It's knowing that the world is at your fingertips and not shutting your eyes to it or not shutting your mind to it, but actually enjoying the privilege that we have, that information is at our fingertips. I always get so when I posted my first water shortage video, my first political video, I got a lot of mixed reactions. A lot of people were very supportive, and I love that. But there was a lot of people who were not. And they would ask me, Janina, bakit ka bakit ka nakikisaw-saw sa politics? Why are you speaking on this? Why are you? I don't know. Why don't you just stay quiet? You're still young, and all of these things. And people ask, why did you switch content? And then I asked them, bakit hindi? Why not? Why shouldn't I have a say on our leaders? Who's to tell me I don't have a say on how we get led or served? Because honestly, that's the basic foundation of democracy. And I'm just as much as a Filipino citizen as any other person. Because last I checked, your profession, so whether I'm a singer, a speaker, or a YouTuber, or my age, whether I'm 15 years old or 21 now, or my status, they don't make you any less of a Filipino citizen. Plus, isipin natin to generation ko. Lahat ng mga loans, yung 9 trillion pesos of loans, generation natin yung mababayad nun. Kung hindi tayo, yung mga anak natin. And so, any decision made today will have consequences or benefits to us in the future. And we'll have to live with those choices. So I know right now it feels like, wow, that was a very easy transition, a very good political awakening. No. So my first time in Open Waters was a political roundtable, and I was not very proficient yet in political speak, in that kind of lingo and jargon, and it ended up, me getting canceled on Twitter. And then, the first time I supported senatorial candidates, all of them lost. And I remember I was at an interview and he asked me, Janina, hindi ka ba na-discourage dito? Hindi mo ba gusto mag-give up? And then I kind of calmly thought about it, and I said, no. And I said, no, I don't want to give up, because it just shows me that there's so much more that needs to be done. Ang dami pang kailangan gawin. And there's so much more that we can work on. And so, lastly, we talked about having an open heart that led to open eyes, that led to an open mind. And now we're going to talk about open hands. And so kahit, people were telling me to shut up na lang. People were telling me, you're too young, Janina, you have no idea what you're speaking about. Too late. My hands are already open. Right now I have this series called Trendsetter. And I started that series dahil gusto kong, I wanted to break the stigma that you could only be passionate about politics but not pop culture, or that you can talk about pop culture but not care about politics, where I wanted to empower a generation to be passionate about both, because that's what, that's kind of what being a good citizen is. And so I think now, there are times that I feel discouraged and I get tired and I look at the reality, and actually, speaking of reality, this was not really in the talk, but I just wanted to say now, our reality, our current situation now, and our current reality now, I think we should accept it. We shouldn't be blind to it. We shouldn't, have toxic positivity and just and just put douse resilience on it, but actually accept our current reality, because that will set us up for a better future. We can't push for a good future if we don't accept the reality now. Anyway, I think when I look at how much has to be done, minsan na-overwhelm ako, and maybe you're watching now and you feel overwhelmed also, and okay, ito na, ang daming kailangan gawin. I want to make change, but how do I do it? And I have this really good kind of not story, but I want to talk about honeybees for a second. And if you're a Vela fam, I'm so sorry, you're probably sick of this story, but I love this story with all of my heart. So honeybees are bees that live from 6 to 8 weeks. So they live to 6 to 8 weeks only. And to get through the winter, the entire hive has to produce about 80 to 100 pounds of honey, which is a lot, because a honeybee can only create 1/12 teaspoon of honey in its entire lifespan. And now now you think, oh shucks, now the honeybee, wouldn't the honeybee feel discouraged? But when you, like, if you look at the honeybee, she won't say, oh shucks, I'm only 1 week old, sige, hindi ko na to gagawin. Or she won't say na, sige, I'll let my sister do it na lang, and then I'll just watch and just hope she does good. No. The honeybee looks at the reality, looks at what she can do, and gets straight to work. And she creates her 1/12 teaspoon of honey, no matter how small she perceives it to be. And what I love about the end of this story is that, by winter, honeybees have already created 3 times as much honey as needed, which is 200 to 300,000, 200 to 300 pounds of honey. And so I think that is a great example of how important it is that we do our part. Because my 1/12 teaspoon of honey is not any more important than your 1/12 teaspoon of honey. Because there are people that you are close to that I could never reach, that will never pick up one of my videos, that will never listen to one of these webinars, but they will listen to you. There are orgs that you can participate in that I could never do. There are perspectives that you could give that I could never have. And so my 1/12 matters, but your 1/12 matters just as much as mine does. And so now I want to ask you, what is your 1/12 teaspoon? Is it volunteering at an org? Is it volunteering in World Vision? Is it donating if you can? Is it giving? Is it giving monetary value, or is it time? Is it even as simple as being a good citizen and working on your character and being a good sibling to your being a good kuya or ate to your siblings, or being a good daughter or son to your parents? What is your 1/12 right now? What is in your hand that you can offer to the rest of the hive? And I want to, kind of go back to the legacy part and ask you, if you died tomorrow, wow, so morbid. But if you died tomorrow, how will you be remembered? Because you know how history will always judge us. And so we're living a crazy pandemic now. We're living a crazy year. And obviously, history books will be written about us today. And in the future, if your great-grandchild asks you, Lola, di ba buhay ka noong 2020? Ano yung ginagawa mo nun? Will you be happy with your answer? If you're not, right now, then maybe, we can start doing our 1/12. And instead of focusing on changing the entire world, maybe we can focus on changing our little part of the world, starting with an open heart, then open eyes, then an open mind and open hands, so that we could see a better one. So yeah, thank you guys for listening to me today. That's kind of all I wanted to share.
Thank you so much, Janina. And we're really inspired by your tagline to be a little kinder. And wow, I think that we really discussed a lot. As you know, we were discussing yesterday about our mental health, and then servant leadership, and then earlier the economy, and now with youth empowerment. Thank you for that talk. And there are so many questions here that we want to discuss as well. So I guess one question from us is how was the journey to get to where you are now? Like what were the steps that you needed to take, and the struggles that you needed to face to get to where you are now?
Yeah. So it took a lot of listening, as I mentioned a while, a lot of listening and understanding the world that went beyond me, and that was utilizing what was already given. And so that's really, for me, it was the internet. It was trying to stay as informed and as and as updated as I can be in terms of our nation. What else? There's always a lot of bashing that went into it, and until now, I still get a lot of hate for what I do. But I think it was also weighing what was more important at the moment. And so in those times, because again, you want to give up, but I think, oh wow, is fighting for the vulnerable, is is speaking for the ones who don't have a voice, is giving hope to the hopeless. Is this more important than, being bashed right now? And most often it's yes, or actually it has always been a yes. That has always been more important to me in my little balancing scale and weighing scale. So it's a lot of questioning also every single opportunity that you get, and you ask yourself, is this worth it? Is it worth it to do what you're doing? And again, more often than not, it's a yes. Yeah, so I think it's been a growth in my career, but also as a person. Not really in the journey to selflessness. I think it was not really thinking of yourself less, right? There's that quote. It's not thinking of yourself less or as a lesser person, but just thinking of yourself a little bit less. And at the end of the day, the return of that has been more than I can ever imagine. Just knowing that God has used me as a vessel to bring him glory, and to share his love to to the people who have been entrusted to me, which are my subscribers and my followers. And so it's been a long and difficult journey, but not one that I could have survived without my support system, without my family, who always kind of encourage me when I'm down, or who kind of guide me and direct me in the right way when I'm a little bit too emotional, when I'm a little bit too, let's just say, passionate. When I'm a little bit too passionate, people who can guide me and kind of confront me, and tell me the hard truth. So there are a lot of factors to this journey, but I think it's always been worth it.
Wow, thank you so much. And I think that it is really worth it for everyone here to really step up and to help those in need. So I guess the question is, other than World Vision, other than your advocacies, how are you being able to help? How are you showing kindness to others during this time?
Yeah, so I think definitely it starts from the home, and it starts from within. I think I'm a firm believer that we can address the corruption in the government, but we shouldn't do that without also addressing the corruption that's happening within us, and within our small circles. And so starting small, and starting with the institutions that God has immediately blessed you with, like, again, yourself, your family, your friend group, your church group. And so practicing kindness, and practicing selflessness and compassion and empathy, even just in that moment, has always been a big thing. And it doesn't it's not less important than the big scale stuff. And so I think a simple way that we can do that is to kind of check up on people. Hey, how are you? How are you doing today? Are you good? Or it could be posting an encouraging tweet, or it could be again, of course, we want, and of course, if you want to take that a step further, it's relief efforts. As I try my best to give everything, to give as much as I can, as if it's time or effort, and donate if I'm eligible, able to. And so it's always giving back to the community that I kind of grew up in. And so showing kindness in every single way that I can think of. Yeah.
So there's really I love that you said that you can do that within your family and within the community that you're already in. So the youth today, you can reach out. Maybe your neighbor needs help, maybe your friend with a small business needs help, and all of these things that we can do together to really show that kindness. So I think there's a question. Yes.
I actually love that you mentioned small businesses, because I think that's also something that I want to encourage people to do. Because if you have a friend that has a small business, you have no idea how much it means to them to even just comment, to repost, to like, to kind of give interaction and help out their algorithm, even if you don't have the monetary means to support them in that way. But even just on social media, supporting them as much as you can is actually a crazy act of kindness to them that they super appreciate. And so that's something that I've learned lately, that supporting your friends online, or small businesses is really means a lot to them.
Yeah,
Sorry,
so
can we go back to the question?
no, of course, that's really great. So we want to also help those who are around us, our friends, and even we even have small businesses, maybe small, but they're also donating. They're also fundraising for a specific cause, and that's really something that gives hope to us. So right now, what is giving hope to you, and how do you cope with everything that is surrounding you?
Wow, what is giving me hope now? Honestly, straight off the bat, it's always been because I feel like my hope has, or I've always tried to anchor my hope on the Lord. And I know that's very whoa, okay. But I think being candid about it's really because if my hope was based on current circumstances, that will obviously be shaky and that would obviously change so often. But because my hope is mounted on an unchanging God, on my Father who will never give up on me, then that hope is either stable or even growing for tomorrow. And I think, yeah, it's always that hope that turns into passion that kind of pushes me to hope for a better future for our nation. And that sounds very Miss Universe, I'm so sorry about that. But I think that's always what also drives me, is that I know that that Filipinos have so much but they're capable of so much more. And so doing everything that I can to provide the means for that, and to enable them to reach their full potential as a people and as individuals. Even just that, the idea that one day we will have a leadership that we're 100% proud of, then I think, that gives me hope, that possibility of one day, just being able to live in a place and to have leaders or people that my children will be able to look up to, that'll be like, yeah, one day you can be like her. And so also thinking about that and thinking about what kind of country am I leaving behind to my children and to my grandchildren, and kind of being idealistic. I don't think I know people are kind of against being idealistic now, but I love being the idealistic, because I'd rather shoot for the stars and land on the moon than not shoot at all. So yeah, it's God and just the idea of the future.
Wow, thank you for that. And yes, World Vision also would love to. That's why we really love having you as our ambassador, as your hope in God also, and your hope for this country is very alive in the work that you do. So there's a question here from Shaina Paz. She says, how can we link our current situation on the social issues that are at hand, even though we are not directly affected by them?
Oh, I love that. So I think I always started small. So I started with makeup, right? That was my videos, and then I kind of moved a little bit out of my comfort zone into talking about inner beauty, and then a little bit out talking about confidence, and then a little bit out talking about women empowerment. So I think starting from what you're already passionate about, is always the kind of the easiest way to go, and then stepping and taking it one step at a time after that. And so for me, it was my comfort in water and basic necessities, that kind of got me to speak up about it, because I think it's a muscle that has to be exercised. Honestly, I think it's kind of difficult to kind of just jump into the Shark Tank without having an emotional connection with it. So if I could encourage you to start first with things that are close to you, and so for me, there's also a time that mental health was very important to me, and so I started advocating on that. And now obviously human rights, which are kind of connected to me but not as much as other people. And so starting kind of small, no, starting with what you're comfortable with and then taking it one step at a time outwards, I think is the best way to go with that.
Wow, really great. I think that we will learn a lot from how we can start small, from what we can see around us right now. And I think there's also a question here that's related to that with Jana Alexandra. She says, what are the tips that you could give to rising influencers or those who are in the platform, in other social media platforms like TikTok, Facebook, Instagram? How can they use their platforms?
Yeah, that's great. I think for any starting influencer, my first, my first tip is don't do it for the money or fame, because honestly, first, those are very fleeting. Second, they take a long time to reach that threshold. I'm just being honest. For my first $100, I was posting 3 videos a week on YouTube, and it took us more than a year, no, mom? More than a year to reach the $100 threshold, which was a lot of hours and a lot of effort and also a lot of investment. And so, doing it that way, and it took me 6 months to reach 500 subscribers. And so, doing it for that, first, it will never really fulfill you, and second, it will never be enough. Um, and so I think doing it for a purpose that again goes beyond that, and doing that for, as you mentioned, because you wanted to use your platform for the good. And so I you probably got that down. So let's go to the platform thing. People love authenticity. People love relatability. People love being able to connect with the person that they look up to. And so I found that being as real as possible is really the way to go. I remember I used to edit my bloopers till the end of my video, and then I just left them in. Right now you'll see me burping and falling and tripping in the middle of the video, but that's me. That's that. I think that's the blessing of the platform, is that we're not given a role to fulfill. We're not given a mask to wear, but what you see is what you get. And I think that's what people love about social media influencers now, is that, hey, they can think, hey, that's like me, I can kind of relate to that. And then as you share your life, you'll share the parts of, as you share the not so nice parts of your life, you're also going to be sharing the good parts of your life as well, that go hand in hand. And so if one time you felt hopeless, then this is the hope that you found, no? If one time you felt sad, then this is the joy that this is how joy was brought back into your life. And so being showing candor in that area of your life has always been a really good way to reach out to followers and to subscribers.
Wow, that's really jam-packed, and I love that answer. And I think that this is very relatable as well. I mean, related to that question, is that how do you know that what you're doing is passion? Like you were saying a while ago, that don't do it for the money, don't do it for the fame. So how do you know that what you're doing is out of passion?
What you're passionate about kind of brings a special glow to your heart. And it makes you feel alive. And so I think that's something that you can ask yourself, what now makes me feel alive? And for me, kasi now it's being able to, talk with subscribers, is being able to do talks like this and communicate and speak my mind. That's what makes me feel alive. And so for you, it could be, if you're singing, you feel most alive when you're performing. You could feel most alive when you're writing. You could feel most alive, I don't know, maybe even organizing and doing admin support. I have a best friend who loves organizing stuff, and she just feels great when she's doing it. And so your passion kind of should bring a special glow to you that nothing else does. And I think that's a way that, I know it sounds kind of abstract, no? But I think if you've ever felt it, you'll know what I mean. And if you haven't felt it, then maybe you haven't felt it. Then maybe there's a passion out there that you haven't explored. But in terms of passion, I want to encourage you, na as we are in this quarantine, kasi we have all of the time in the world, and nobody will see you fail if you try something new. And I think that's something that I grew up with, was that I didn't have that fear, or something that I didn't grow up with, rather, the fear of failure. That, I just kept trying random things, and if they didn't fit my feet, then I just threw the shoes out. And so now that nobody is watching, girl, make a vlog and edit it. If you don't like it, then delete it. Make a song. If you don't like it, then throw it away. I just hope that we can move without the fear of failure. And that way, we can really find what we're passionate about. It's kind of like a trial and error. Ganon.
So it's really, you're just really getting to know yourself and knowing what your gifts are. That's amazing. I think here there's a very nice question. How do we push, or how do we push each other for making a change when people would shrug us off, telling us we're too young to know anything?
That, well, you kind of have to find the right support system for that. I think if we base our identity or validation or acceptance on people who don't want to give it, then we're ultimately doomed. So I think, having a good support system of maybe young people who also feel the same way as you, maybe young people who also sometimes feel discouraged, but also have the same passions and goals, kind of spurring one another and collaborating and just feeling for each other's feeling each other's victories and defeats and losses. I have a barkada who's very, very quote unquote political now, and who's very passionate in that. They're from UP, but they're also from church, so we have a good balance of activista and Christian. So in that group, we're always just conversing with one another, encouraging one another, and I think if I only listened to my haters, then I wouldn't be here today. But it's because I listen to the people who really know me, because I listen to the people who support me and love me and want to see me grow. Because I listen to these people instead of the people who obviously don't want to see me do any of those, then that's how I keep going. And so I know it's easier said than done, but not focusing on those people who tell you that it can't be done, but again, focusing on the people who tell you that it can be, and also focusing on your why. Going back to your purpose, going back to your reason why you even began speaking up in the first place. Because again, if you weigh the pros and cons of that, hopefully the pros of speaking up will outweigh, the cons of being put down and discouraged by the older generation. But I hope that we also learn to communicate with our older generation. And if you are, part of the older generation, please listen. I love you. Thank you for being here. But I think communication is so important between both generations. And I get this question so often because there's a lot of clashing between both generations. And there's also clashing here in my house. And I'm going to be honest and saying that it's not the perfect discussion lagi. But throughout the quarantine, throughout a lot of discussions, we've learned the best way, to just put out the ideas and do it in a gentle and honorable and respectful way. Because first, it's okay to agree to disagree. I think I should get that out there. But also, it's important at the end of the day, you can clearly say that I have respected and honored my authorities while fleshing out my ideas, while explaining my ideas and my opinions. Because I really see the value of the wisdom and experience of the older generation. But I also see the value of the passion and the determination of mine. And so, pushing for that actual collaboration, and not just one can do this and the other one can do this. But I think working together with the wisdom, with the experience, with the determination, with the passion, putting that together, I think that will really slingshot us into a better nation and into a better future. So hopefully, I would encourage you to try to have a good conversation without raising your voice, without getting too emotional, but actually trying to listen to their perspective and actually asking them, I understand where you're coming from, but is it okay if I flesh out my opinion as well? Is it okay if I explain to you kind of what I'm feeling or what I'm thinking right now? And kind of having that gentle conversation that I feel like will be a great kind of head start to teamwork that will help us in the future.
Wow. Thank you for that, Janina. And it came from her. You guys, you heard what she said. You're not too young. You're not too young to start an advocacy, to help other people, to be compassionate, to be kind. And this is high time that we should be showing that. And we thank you once again, Janina, for joining us this evening already. And we just want to ask you, what are your last message, or what is your parting message for the youth that are listening, the 573 that are listening.
Wow, so many. First of all, thank you for being here, because the fact that you are here means that you want to make a change, and that you want to make a difference. And that's really the first step. The first step is showing up. And then second is empathy. So again, compassion, and it's feeling and connecting, and it's understanding. And then, sorry. Empathy. And then education. Education. And so opening your mind, listening, learning, again with the understanding. And I think also at the end of it all is going back to the 1/12th, asking yourself, what is the 1/12th that I can offer to the world right now? Whether you feel like it's small, it's not, as long as it's your 1/12th, because there's always something very special that only you can offer to the world that nobody else can. And so if we do that, if we show up, if we empathize, and if we educate ourselves, we'll really see a better nation. And yeah, I'm very, very excited to see what you 570 people or youth can do. It's not a one woman show, and I'm already imploring you to come work with me. Come work with me, and let's make a better nation. And let's kind of make it the nation that we're going to be proud of, and that we're going to be proud to present to our children. You can do it. I believe in you. Thank you so much for being here again, and I will see you on social media.
Thank you, Janina. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And of course, you can still find Janina in her YouTube accounts, her social media, and even here on World Vision. You'll find her with us in our advocacies. And Janina's been hosting our events as well. We had the 5K campaign challenge before with our student ambassadors, and they raised 280,000. Imagine just young people raising that much for the families who were affected by COVID-19. So we're very grateful for Janina. We're grateful for her passion, her love for the Lord, and her love to serve the people. So thank you, Janina, for joining us. We are now going to our next part of the program. I know you're all waiting for the winner of the Enderon College's 10,000 worth, you guys, of our prize. Okay, so this is a 2-hour online tutorial session worth 2,200 pesos each. And one winner, so for those who won yesterday, please do message us. And please do let us know that you were that person, and we will email you. And for the grand winner, you will win a free SME Management e-commerce bootcamp course worth 10,000. So we are just going to pull up very quickly here our wheel, our wheel of names, all 2,000 of you there. Okay, so I hope you can see it on my screen. All right. So we are gonna go and wheel that. Is it working? No, it is not. Okay, wait, hold on just a second. There we go, and it's running. Let us see. Wow, Christine D. Moscaya. So Christine D. Moscaya, you are the winner of the 10,000 worth of the e-commerce course. So please do message us. We will find you on our registration list. So thank you so much for joining this event. And before you go, I know you're all asking the question of how you're going to get your e-certificate. So just a reminder for everyone. We will not be giving out the instructions here. We will be giving out at the event page. So if you could go quickly to World Vision's event page where you can see the Virtual Youth Summit 2020, we will post tonight the link to the form, the feedback form that we've all been talking about. So please head down to that, and we will give instructions, and it will be up there for 2 days. So for those who weren't able to join us live, you still have at least 2 days to catch up on what we went through for this 2-day event. And then we will give you instructions on how you can receive your e-certificate. So we will post that tonight, and it will be open for everyone, available for everyone to fill up for the next 2 days. Okay, so you have 2 days to register and to answer all of the questions there, and it will be talking about what we have discussed here. And so please do go to the event page in World Vision's Facebook page. You will see the events page there, and click on the Virtual Youth Summit 2020. And so stay tuned later tonight for the instructions, and you will find the link to our feedback form. Okay, so we will only have 2 days for that. And remember, we will not be entertaining more questions about the e-certificates after those 2 days, because we will give you that allotted time for you to be able to watch through the videos and answer the feedback form. So please please be reminded of this. All right? Okay. So before we end, I will still close, but we do have a video coming from one of our speakers who will give a last message to the youth. So please stand by for that video.
Hello! Kamusta po kayong lahat? Ako po si Ato Maraulio, isang mamamahayag at kasalukuyang Goodwill Ambassador ng UNHCR o UN Refugee Agency. Pwede nyo rin akong tawaging Kuya Atom dahil hindi naman masyadong nagkakalayo ang ating mga edad. Pagpasensyahan nyo na at hindi ko kayo nakapiling sa webinar na ito, pero hayaan nyo po ako mag-iwan ng maiksing mensahe para sa lahat ng mga youth leaders na kasama natin ngayon. Simulan natin sa isang bagay na hindi natin may iwasan. And I know that all of you will appreciate if I get real and talk to you like adults. These are not the best of times. Nasa gitna tayo ng pandemya at ng pinakamalubhang krisis pangkalusugan ng ating henerasyon. Dahil sa COVID-19, nabaliktad ang buhay ng marami. Hindi tayo makapasok sa school, bawal muna ang mga sports, hindi natin mabisita ang mga mahal natin sa buhay. Pero higit dyan, marami ang nawalan ng trabaho. Naghihingalo ang ekonomiya at araw-araw, tila puno ng masasamang balita sa telebisyon na parang ayaw mo na nga manood. Sabi ng mga eksperto, maaaring sa kalagitnaan ng susunod na taon, magkaroon na tayo ng bakuna sa COVID-19. Sana mas maaga ng konti, pwedeng mas mahuli, maaaring ang hindi pa dumating. Ang totoo niyan, hindi pa talaga natin alam nang may katiyakan kung anong mangyayari sa hinaharap. Habang hindi pa dumarating ang araw na iyon, kailangan muna nating magtiis ng konti at umayon sa mga pangangailangan ng ating panahon. Sigurado narinig niyo na yung mga katagang new normal, parang ang ating bagong realidad until further notice. Pero ano nga bang mundo ang naghihintay sa atin sa kabilang dako ng pandemyang ito na inaasahan nating lahat? Well, without the virus, on the surface, many things would improve. We may be able to do a lot of the things that we're not able to do now, and life will definitely get better for the families who are severely affected by the crisis, especially our frontliners. But there are even bigger challenges that we must face beyond COVID-19. Around the world, inequality is worsening, and justice remains elusive, especially for those in the margins. The UNHCR estimates that one person is forced to flee because of conflict, violence, persecution, and calamity every 2 seconds. A UNHCR report, or rather a UN report, says that 1 million species are at risk of extinction in the next few years because of environmental degradation and climate change. If things don't change, average global temperatures will increase by around 3 to 5 degrees Celsius by the year 2100. That spells disaster for a lot of people, especially the poor. So I'm a big fan of The Lord of the Rings. Medyo nalihis ng konti, but I promise this will make sense in the end. I won't go into the details of the story, but one of my favorite moments in the book and in the movie is when Frodo, the ring bearer, and Gandalf the Grey, the wise old wizard, have a heart-to-heart in the cave after an intense battle. Frodo says, "I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened." To which Gandalf replied, and maybe some of you are familiar with this line, "So do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us." It's very powerful. Despite the difficult times, there is really no reason to despair or to lose hope, because there is you. Yes, you, sitting at home listening to this news nerd talking about the Lord of the Rings. Although the challenge is great, it is up to every generation to face the challenge of their times. When I was a student in the University of the Philippines, I quickly realized that my student life would not be complete if I didn't study about the issues that affected society, and if I didn't get involved in the causes that were dear to my heart. I joined student organizations and became active in the student council. Those experiences are actually what led me to this path of being a reporter later in life. To this day, I try to stay true to the energy and idealism of my younger days. You are the youth. Together, you are strong, you are fearless, and you have infinite potential. Don't wait, and don't count on the older generation to fix things for you. You guys can lead the way to see the changes that you want. In fact, changes that we need in society. Go ahead and harness the potential of social media. Use it for good. Develop your talents to craft meaningful messages to reach out to more people. Ask more from our leaders. Show them the right path if they seem to have lost their way. Throw that ring into the fires of Mount Doom. I just had to sneak in one more LOTR reference before I finish. So I have rambled enough. I would like to thank World Vision for the opportunity to speak to all of you today. I hope that you learned a lot from this webinar, and more importantly, I hope that you were inspired. Please take care, have courage for the days ahead, and make us proud.
Thank you so much, Mr. Atom. And remember, we are infinitely blessed to have this potential to be the future of our generation. And so, remember, we will have the chance to answer our feedback form and quiz after this two-day event. Please stay by and look at the event page of World Vision. Check it later tonight as we will send you the link there. We will not be sending it through your emails, but to that Facebook post in the event page. So also, if you're interested to join World Vision Student Ambassadorship Program, or you want to bring World Vision to your campus in the future, or involve your school org or fundraise for your communities, please feel free to send a comment on the feedback form and we will surely get back to you. Again, World Vision, together with GCash, our streaming partner, and Enderun Colleges for sponsoring the event, and our other event partners as seen on your screen, we thank you for joining us at the Virtual Youth Summit 2020. Bye and God bless.